You just recently released a video talking about the lock capsule. We just wanted to briefly discuss it and direct our listeners to watch the video. But how was that making that? How did you even find out about the lock capsule? You know, could you kind of explain just a little bit about that without revealing kind of the main reveal of the lock capsule? You know,
I originally heard about it. I think it was on the Cutting Room Floor Wiki, which is a really good website where they kind of document the internal data of various video games. It's kind of like a Wikipedia, but just for video game internal data. Did some research. I've actually found some guy on an internet forum somewhere who snapped some photos of himself doing it in 2014, which would have been 4 years after Black and White released, in which he's saying, "Oh, I think I'm the first person in the world to have actually opened the lock capsule," and as far as I can tell, he actually was.
Wow.
And he taken some photos of his DS as he did it, and that gave me a better idea of how it would have worked. And from there, I looked at a text dump from Black and White to find out what Mr. Locke would have said had you brought in the lock capsule. And it's actually a really difficult video to make because it's really difficult to record on a DS. If I recall, I don't have the equipment, so I haven't looked. Anyway, I think you had to get a special piece of equipment directly from Nintendo through some kind of ambassador program or something like that in order to have the hardware to record a DS.
mm-hmm.
And so I think that's probably the main reason why I don't think very many people have done the lock capsule event. But in order to, not only is it difficult to pull off because you need 2 DSs and 2 games and all that, but there's no real good way to record it unless you just want to record your DS with a phone, and then it just looks terrible. So, so I don't have that ambassador thing, and so I spent countless hours. Actually, I didn't actually do the event myself. I don't even have a DS.
Actually,
I played through about 10 or 12 hours of Pokemon Black version on an emulator to get to Castelia City and some other stuff after that I needed to have the footage of, and then I talked to a whole bunch of NPCs, recorded myself doing that, and then I went back in my video editing program and cut out letter by letter. I was like, well, okay, I need a capital C, I need a lowercase a, I need a lowercase p, lowercase s, and so forth. And I had the text dump of the game, and so I knew what Mr. Locke would have said. And so I cut one, almost like those movies where they have like the ransom note, where they cut out of the magazine each letter and say, we have your daughter or whatever. But this time I was trying to say like, oh, you have a lock capsule, and so
That's incredible.
I cut one letter out of each NPC conversation. I was walking around everywhere talking to people until they used a capital C or whatever, and capital M was a real pain in the ass, to be honest. But finally, I had all the letters, and I, went through and moved them, 1/10 of a pixel at a time or whatever, in order to make the conversation with Mr. Locke what it would have been according to the text dump. And some of it, not all of it, but most of it was confirmed in this guy's photos he'd snapped with his DS from 2014. But I had the text dump, and I knew that he said he was a sad clown and what was in the lock capsule and all that. And so I basically did it like a ransom note, and then I, it's even more complicated than that. I won't go into the whole thing, but I think that's why no one ever had a video of the lock capsule event being performed, and that's why technically, I guess you could say I still don't, was because I actually had to, video edit an illusion that mirrored exactly down to the very frame, second by second, to what it would have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a bit OCD, and because when you're talking to the NPCs, there's actually, it doesn't just, a line of dialogue doesn't just appear. It actually kind of goes it appears left to right. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but
Yeah.
It's actually, I actually slowed it down frame by frame and saw that each frame, which is 1/30th of a second, they give you 4 characters, which includes punctuation and spaces. And so I went through and edited so that, the words appear on the screen 4 characters at a time as I'm talking to this NPC, but again, it's those ransom note letters. And so it's really, I think it took me about 150 hours to make that 10-minute YouTube video. And
Wow.
Yeah,
Holy
it was
cow.
ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
That's
But
crazy.
I can tell you from all the research and everything I did that it is frame by frame, you know, pixel by pixel, exactly how it would have appeared, you know, had the lock capsule event actually, the Game Freak's intentions for the Game Freak for the lock capsule event actually been carried out. It would have looked just like that.
Bravo.
That's awesome.
Wow. Yeah, that's a ton of work. So
It's
we're
probably way
always-
more information than anyone wanted to hear, but that's how it was done.
No, that's super interesting to just hear the background behind all the work that you did, and especially because it's a 10-minute video, and I would have never guessed that much like thinking and underlying like skill you would have to kind of create that and make it cohesive.
Well, it's also just awesome to see how much you actually put into this, and it's not just like something that you only spend a few minutes on a couple days a week and then release. This is like something you do really care about, and I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I do full time. Actually, I don't work. I just I'm just doing this full time, and so a 10-minute video typically takes me something like 100, maybe 200 hours. I'm kind of like one of those, like that cliche, the guy who gets on a bus and moves to LA thinking he's become a famous actor.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that, but I moved to China because the cost of living is low, and I trying to make it on YouTube. I'm kind of living off savings at the moment, just putting all my time into researching the cut content of right now Pokemon games, and hopefully keep at it and keep translating untranslated interviews and doing this kind of thing, and hopefully I'll be able to make it one of these days. Right now, I'm working on a series of Ken Sugimori interviews. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know who Ken Sugimori is, he was the lead monster designer for Game Freak. Or before Game Freak was the Game Freak that it is today, it was a magazine, kind of like a gaming fan magazine that I think is pronounced Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokemon, the famous bug collector. Yeah. And Ken Sugimori, the artist, they started a fan magazine together. Eventually it went under. It was also called Game Freak. And then when the Game Freak magazine went under, they started a video game company. They pitched the Pokemon idea to Nintendo in, I think, 1991. Shigeru Miyamoto got signed on as a producer, and that's why in the Japanese versions, the main character and the rival, what I guess would be something like Ash and Gary in our version, is Satoshi and Shigeru in the Japanese version, is named after the creator and Satoshi and Shigeru Miyamoto, because he looks up to him as something of a mentor.
Oh wow! Okay.
Which is interesting. But so Ken Sugimori is the artist. He didn't do all the Gen 1 designs, but he's done a lot of designs over the years. He's still over there. And he finalized the designs of the original 151, and he's still a Game Freak. And so he did a series of interviews with a Japanese magazine in 2011 called Nintendo Dream Magazine, which is kind of like their version of Nintendo Power, and where he goes into some more than others, but he goes into the origin stories of all the designs for the Gen 5 Pokemon, including beta design information, even some Pokemon ideas, or some that even had art attached to them. Unfortunately, he doesn't show the art, but he talks about it. Pokemon that were scrapped entirely, and other just kind of beta design information, like the Hydreigon family were originally tank dragons and some other things like that that are revealed in these interviews that were never translated until the past month or so. I've been working to translate them, and there's an artist named Nick Cron, who's Cronick is his Twitter name. He's been helping me out. He's been doing the kind of, I guess you say, like fan art interpretations of Sugimori's descriptions of the scrapped Pokemon. And so it's been really cool to kind of discover some Pokemon that were tossed out, and hopefully someday we'll see art for. Right now we just have Sugimori's descriptions of them. But I think there's 7 issues. I'm not interviews in these volumes. I'm not even totally certain how many interviews there are, but I've found and now translated and published 3 of them, and I think there's 4 left. So I'm really hoping to. I'm going to have to actually buy those from some flea market in Japan's website or something like that and have them translated. So it's a bit tricky, but I hope to complete the whole set.
What sort of significance do you think that all of this has?
Significance. Well, I had someone translate. I went to Reddit r/translate, which I'll use to kind of double check some key phrases of the translator that I've hired, because I don't speak Japanese. And I asked someone to confirm a particular phrase, and they confirmed the translation for me, and then they sent me a DM, a personal message on Reddit, saying they looked at my website and they said, you've really spent a lot of time contemplating a counterfactual universe within a fictional universe. In other words, things that didn't happen within a fictional world. And I was, when you put it that way, what was your question? What is the significance of it? When you put it in the eyes of a guy, of a normie, I guess they would say it has no significance whatsoever. But I find it really interesting, and I think there's not the majority, but I think there's a significant percentage of the Pokemon fan base and the video gaming fan base in general who are really interested in the kind of coulda, woulda, shouldas of video game history, and how, if they hadn't scrapped this idea, or if they'd done this instead of that, which they almost did, how would these games that we grew up playing, that we have such fond memories of, that in a way, in some ways define our childhood, and how they could have been different. And I'm not going to say how we might be different as a result, but it is interesting to think about these games that we love so much, that we grew up with, how they might have been different, how they might have even been better. It's just interesting to think about.
I always I recently came to your videos when we first got in contact with you, and the number one thing that stuck out with me was your unique name as well as the character you have. How did you end up getting that doll?
Well, it started with me and my best friend Dave. At the time, he's moved back to the UK, and I now live in a different city in China. But we used to live in this really idyllic Chinese city called Yangshuo, which is kind of legendary for its karst mountains, and we mostly just got drunk and played foosball. And one night we're in my apartment, and I think we're watching Rick and Morty or something like that. And I think I was watching Rick and Morty, and he was playing my Switch, Breath of the Wild, and we got talking about, I've been doing YouTube for some years, and I was talking about starting a new channel that we could do together. And we were just kind of looking around online, and we stumbled across on Amazon this line of, I think it was American Girl dolls, or something like that, and they're like therapy dolls, where it was like just a standard like female doll, but she was in a wheelchair, and she also came with crutches and I don't even know what to call it, some other therapy equipment. And just for some reason, the idea of a doll in a wheelchair just cracked us both up. Wow. And we're like, oh, absolutely, we should have, we'll have 2 characters. They should both be dolls in wheelchairs. Oh yeah. And he's British, and so actually, originally he was supposed to be the evil scientist.
Gotcha.
And because it's just better for British people. They're better for an evil scientist. And I was going to be. I don't know if you guys ever saw that movie with Tom Cruise, Born on the 4th of July.
Yes.
Or probably more people are familiar with the parody of that in that episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie is a disgruntled veteran, and like the green fatigues and all that, and he's talking about how he was mistreated in Vietnam or whatever. And so I was going to be the disgruntled vet in a wheelchair, and he was going to be the evil scientist. Anyway, we ended up kind of, like I said, he went back to the UK. I ended up moving to another city here in China, and so I took the evil scientist thing, the disgruntled veterans kind of went by the wayside. And as far as the name Dr. Lava, I was just kind of looking for something simple and short and catchy, and doctor something, doctor, and I just landed on Lava, and I was like, yeah, that'll work. Apparently, there actually is some other YouTuber whose name is in real life, legitimately, I think, Dr. Lava Trudeau, I think.
Oh my.
So unfortunately,
okay.
I've got to share my search results with some kind of psychologist or something like that. So it's not a completely original name, but yeah, just short and simple. And originally, I think I was just telling you guys on the break. Yeah, the original idea was for Dr. Lava to be something of like a supervillain, kind of like a Darth Vader type character, which is why he's named Dr. Lava as opposed to something less super villain sounding. The original idea was that he would be, this is, in reference to the flat earth conspiracy, that the earth is flat and there's an ice wall around the perimeter that the government or the UN or NASA or whoever protects from discovery by the public, so they can maintain this lie that the earth is flat, and all the money that is supposedly being spent on space exploration is actually being pocketed by the world's super elite. And of course, NASA is sort of at the heart of that. And so Dr. Lava was meant to be this, I guess you'd say, the star of a cartoon series
About the
where
topic.
he was kind of like, where he was sort of like the Darth Vader character. He was the captain of the NASA guards who protected the ice wall. And I worked for a couple months on a cartoon. I uploaded a little bit of what was left of the video file to my second channel on YouTube a few days ago, actually. But it ended up it was just doing my head in. It was making a cartoon while just hunched over a computer all by myself. I was biting off way more than I could chew. And flirted with a few other ideas for Dr. Lava, and eventually I landed on Nintendo cut content, and it seemed to be kind of a good fit and something I enjoyed. And it seemed like there was sort of I guess you could say, an underserved, because gaming is the most oversaturated part of YouTube, and but cut content, specifically Nintendo cut content, seemed to be a place where, from what I've seen at least, there's just a few people doing it, and they mostly seem to just kind of echo each other or just kind of repeat rumors or whatever. And I thought it would be a more interesting way to do it, just to have everything sourced and to really be able to find some interviews or some concept art or internal data that a lot of it I find from the cutting room floor. Or Helix Chamber is a wonderful blog with all kinds of great information. I've used that before, but I always get really excited when I can find something that's never been translated into English before, like those Ken Sugimori interviews, or I'm currently working on where he reveals some scrapped ideas for Gen 5. And there's a Shigeru Miyamoto interview that I've been looking for. I'm not actively looking for it now, but I was looking for it for a long time. I'm still really want to get my hands on it, where he did an interview in 2003 with the Japanese version of Playboy magazine, and he says a few things about Mario 128, which of course was never finished, or I mean, there's a lot of speculation as to just what it is and how far into production they were. Was it just a tech demo and so forth? But he says a few things that nothing explosive, but he says some things that you've never heard before in reference to Mario 128's production, and he says it in a Playboy magazine interview. And so I've really been trying to get my hand. I found a Playboy magazine interview with Shigeru Miyamoto some months back, and I was like, yes, I finally found it. Googling around in Japanese characters and all this stuff, finally got it, and I had it translated, and I realized after it was all done that it was actually a 2004 interview, and apparently Miyamoto's done at least 2, if not more, Playboy magazine interviews, and I had the wrong one. So, but I do, it's a really fun to be able to find something like that. And, because the impression I want the viewer to get is like, wow, Playboy magazine interview with Shigeru Miyamoto. I never heard this information. I didn't think it would be found, in a Playboy magazine. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm always trying to track down and get my hands on, and hopefully, it's always kind of fun to be the first person to find that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was always super impressed when I was watching your videos, about like the true detective work. Obviously you have your resources. There's the other people who like data mine the games, and like there's other like previously translated interviews. But it was like always really impressive to me, like the fact that you were going out and you were finding these things. First of all, like being aware that they even exist, and then taking the time to translate them and post like all the information, like the raw information on your website. Like that was I thought that was really, really cool when I first started seeing that you were doing that. The Animal Crossing is going to be delayed again until 2020 this time for sure. I think they basically said that this is the guaranteed release date in, I think it was April,
March 20th.
March, one of those two, in 2020. And in a later interview, they came out and said that the reason they've been moving it back, and they've been doing this for a couple of games, I think, is just they're trying to maintain a healthy work-life balance for their employees. And I'm not totally sure if that was specifically Nintendo saying that, or if it was the developer of Animal Crossing specifically that's having that policy, and Nintendo's respecting that. Not sure.
Who's developing it then?
I'd have to double check, but I believe it's the same studio that's made all of the Animal Crossing games over the years.
I always thought that was R&D, Nintendo R&D1, or some kind of internal studio. Is that not the case?
From my understanding, that's what I thought it was.
I haven't played Animal Crossing since the first one on GameCube, which was fantastic, but I'm very much out of the loop.
No, it does look like with this new one upcoming, it is one of their internal divisions, Nintendo EAD.
I think that's what they call R&D1 now. I think they changed their name to EAD at some point. I think the thing I was most interested to see in E3 was the new Animal Crossing. It looks really good. Like I said, I played a lot of the first one on GameCube, but then I've kind of set out the rest of the series. I think I might actually come back for the new Animal Crossing. What do you guys think?
I actually watched the whole Treehouse on Animal Crossing, and I've never played an Animal Crossing game. And like I was just like kind of blown away. I think it looks awesome. Like, and I'm probably gonna grab it on the Switch and play a lot of it.
Yeah, I think it looks really good. The original Animal Crossing I really enjoyed, and it's a game I've actually been wanting to make a cut content episode about for a long time. And it's got a really interesting backstory. I don't know if you guys played the first one. I know you just said that you didn't, but did any of y'all play the original? Kind of original, the first one that came to North America, the GameCube Animal Crossing.
No.
Yep.
Oh, Henry did.
Yeah.
Because you probably know this, that originally it came out in Japan. Well, it was supposed to be for the 64DD, and then it got downgraded essentially to the 64 and released as Animal Forest in Japan. And then they re-released it on GameCube. I think I'm getting this right. Re-released it on GameCube as Animal Forest Plus, and then they later localized that into the Western market, and they added a lot of Western-specific content, like our holidays and that kind of thing, and some other stuff that wasn't in the 64 or the GameCube versions in Japan. And then the Japanese were so tickled by the North American version of Animal Crossing that they localized the Western localization back over to Japan. And so you ended up actually getting 4 different versions of Animal Crossing: the 64, the Japanese GameCube, the US, which was kind of like an improvement and localized version of the Japanese GameCube one, and then the one that they brought over to Japan. And when they brought it back over to Japan, the US version, Western version, whatever, they added even more new stuff, which including a lot of great content, like public works, where you could hire Tom Nook to build, like wells and I think fountains. What's the word for it? Not plumbing. Anyway, a whole bunch of kind of public works and other stuff. You could wake up Tom Nook late at night and shop in his store. If you remember, he used to close it, I think it was at 9 p.m., but you could wake him up and he'd charge you a higher price. and he'd be in his pajamas, and there's all kinds of stuff they added in the fourth version that was only ever released in Japan. It might be a while before I make that video because Animal Crossing just doesn't have the audience of something like Pokemon. But it's a really interesting story all around of the original Animal Crossing, and I've got high hopes for this new one. I'm really looking forward to it. I think I'll get back on the bandwagon.
Yeah, no, I didn't know the history behind it at all. So that's all news to me. But that sounds really cool. And yeah, from there it kind of took off and kind of solidified its place. Because then after the GameCube one, there was like Wild World on DS, and then there was New Leaf on the 3DS, different things like that. And I know there was the mobile phone version. So yeah, it's definitely gained in popularity. Watching the Nintendo Treehouse, that was awesome to see. My beef always with Animal Crossing was that I couldn't ever play like very well with other people, because I thought that it would be really cool if you could build up like an area with other people, and they really like showed that off, that you could really make like a cool island with your friends and play like on couch co-op together to gather materials and whatnot. So I definitely can see this being a game that I play with friends, little kids, just like have them hack trees for me so I can build stuff. It's truly awesome.
Yeah, it looks like, a lot of the time, unfortunately, the new Pokemon game, it seems like somehow the studios or the companies that are making these games, there's some kind of disconnect between them and what the fans actually want. And it feels like with this new Animal Crossing, they got someone, a super fan off the street and said, what do you want in this new game that we haven't had in the past games? And the fan just threw out a bunch of ideas and said, all right, we'll do all of them. Because it looks like they've improved on just about everything, and any kind of suggestion you could possibly have, they've actually looks like they're incorporating it. So I'm pretty excited. There was some cut content from Breath of the Wild 1 and some unused concept art. I guess not actually cut content in the strictest definition of the word, but I think you know what I mean. That I think actually has one in particular has a pretty good chance at making it into the sequel. So the thing I think has the best chance of coming into the sequel was I think his name is, I always mispronounce everything, but Fujibayashi, the director of the first one. I'm not sure if he's going to be director, if they even announced who's going to be directing the new one, but he sounded, I think there was 2 quotes delivered by him in the 30-minute making of Breath of the Wild Nintendo documentary they released about 2 years ago now. And he sounded like he was, and there was some concept art to go with it as well, that they originally explored the idea of having Minish villages, look like at least one, but that's from the way Fujibayashi described it, more than one Minish village spread out throughout Hyrule. He sounded like he really wanted to do it, and I'd actually kind of be surprised if they didn't bring the Minish into Breath of the Wild 2. Just because he sounded so enthusiastic about it and how sad he was that they didn't end up incorporating it in Breath of the Wild 1. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think odds are basically guaranteed that they have to incorporate some new kind of character system in the game, because like we basically met all the NPCs in the game right now, and it wouldn't really feel super fresh if we just had to go back and talk to the same people. And I mean, it would if we got to play as Zelda, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. I do think I agree with you that I think there is a good chance that they would bring that back, the Minish, because I think that would be a really cool way for them to use this engine that they developed, for the Switch. I think it would be really good because they can basically model out specific areas as small, but not have to like affect the overall overworld of that game, which people love so much. And I also think the Minish serve is a really good foil in a lot of storytelling things because, well, they just function uniquely.
Yeah, I think so. Has it been confirmed the Breath of the Wild sequel is going to take place in the same Hyrule? And that seemed to be from the shots I saw in the trailer. It looked like we're back in Hyrule, right?
Yeah. So it's the same. It's confirmed. It's the same overworld. We're not sure. At least I haven't seen anything guaranteeing whether or not this game is before or after, because there is a Zelda in this game. So technically, that could go one of both ways, but it is in the same world.
Yeah, and that seems like an even, a point in the pro column for why it seems more likely that the Minish would come, because they, if they're using the same overworld and they're looking for ways to differentiate it from the first one, having, Minish villages spread throughout Hyrule would be a good way for them to, kind of reuse the world, but still bring in new content.
Mm-hmm.
So on the topic of the aliens, I think, the Ganon's a great bad guy. I actually kind of prefer Ganondorf, but there was that manga which unfortunately it wasn't high quality enough when they showed it to actually read the words, but you could see there's something of like an alien autopsy, and Ganondorf and Link are kind of bent over what looks like the dead alien on the operating table, and looked like Ganondorf and Link have had to team up in order to, at least temporarily, in order to repel this alien threat. And that sounds like a really interesting new direction to take the story, and it certainly could be dark. I would really hope that they would, if they were going to make it the main bad guy, that would be terrific. But even if it was just kind of a small, kind of like what they did Majora's Mask with the aliens coming to, I think it was Romani Ranch, whatever they called it, Majora's Mask. Yeah, Romani Ranch. Even if it was just a small thing, that would be cool. But I'd really prefer it was the main attraction.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with the main discussion, and that is talking about content with Dr. Lava and then taking it down to our level. So we'll be right back. And then just the last question is just a general question for everybody, and just talking about how why do we think like content is important, what it reveals about the games, and do you think it should be something that's more accessible, or is it something that should stay the way it is right now?
I think it is rather important to kind of think about and to discuss, just because it does kind of show what people are putting into these games and like how they're being made and kind of how decision making happens. Because even though like it's not the most important thing of the games, it gets you kind of in a position where you can understand where they're coming from, and I guess it humanizes the games in a way, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, like when I think about content and all that stuff and accessibility, I definitely think that it's more powerful of a journey when people have to go and discover it. I think that like accessibility in terms of like, finding a YouTube video definitely is, in my eyes, the best way to do it. I don't think it should just be like, freely available. I don't think there just should be just an interview where the developer says, well, this is everything that didn't go in the game, so sorry for people who would have wanted that. I think it's because I think that kind of just robs from the game, and then people don't, see the good aspects of what did come out of it. They're always thinking about, well, I'm sad that we didn't get this. And I think the fact that, if you do look for those things and you do find those things after you experience those games, it's not from a place of want, it's from a place of interest. And I think that really defines why I enjoy watching your videos, because, I find those media, those games precious to me. But I've already, enjoyed those games, and just seeing that extra content is just like it's just a fun little plus.
Yeah, I agree with you. Something else that's kind of interesting is that, when this stuff gets uncovered, what, the kind of coulda, woulda, shoulda is that, there's a lot of, to stay on the topic of Pokemon, but it applies to all kinds of series. But there's a lot of kind of Pokemon fan hacks that have come out over the years. Like Brown version is probably the most famous. That's pretty old now, but a lot of these kind of recently discovered sprites, or like something like Gorochu, even though we just have the back sprite, but all of these kind of cut content ideas can be incorporated into these fan hacks, and I think that's a good way to kind of keep the eternalize or memorialize the cut content, the coulda, woulda, shouldas, is for it to be in sort of like a fan hack where someone can re-release Fire Red or something like that with what's been revealed as what would have been ideas that they would have had in the game, but they scrapped. Someone can make an unofficial remake of the game, and they can include all that stuff. And I know most people don't play those games. I don't actually play those games myself, but I do think it's an interesting way to bring that cut content to life.
For sure.
Yeah. For me, I definitely agree with you guys, but I think it would be interesting, especially given some time, for people to kind of talk about maybe like after the series is done, or maybe like long after things have settled, like maybe some guidebooks or things kind of explaining the origins of like what they thought about with the games and whatnot. That's why I really enjoy some of the E3 conferences, and where they kind of describe the settings or maybe the things that influence the game development. I think that it would still be interesting to kind of read some of the things like that, and then to also hear developers' opinions about how things were received. So if a late game feature was just introduced into the game and that's what made it into the final release version, and it's something that people really enjoyed, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from developers like, yeah, that wasn't something that we even intended, or maybe this was something that was a bug, but people really took off with it, so then we really enjoyed seeing that, So I think a little bit more honest communication.
I really like what Nintendo sort of, for some reason, they've only really done it with Zelda, but I really love they've made these Hyrule Historia, I think it's called Hyrule Artifacts, and I think the third one. And now there was one called Breath of the Wild Masterworks that now I think in November they localized into English. I think they're calling it, I forget, it's like the Book of the Champion, or it's something like that.
Exactly.
And where they've got all this concept art, including concept art for stuff that they didn't use, like a larger glider. And in fact, even in the Japanese version of the book had some pictures of Link concept art for Link's family, which they actually cut out of the English version of the Breath of the Wild concept art book. Anyways, I'm getting off on kind of a tangent now, but yeah, I really like what they've done with Zelda. It would be great to see that with Pokemon, and that's kind of what I'm trying to recreate, at least for Generation 5, with these Sugimori interviews, which is basically a coffee book with all the concept art and the kind of origin stories and the what ifs. Yeah, I think it's great that Nintendo's done that with Zelda. It would be really great if they would do that with Pokemon.
Well, if you release a book, I'll buy it.
Yeah, that too.
I think we all know what would happen to me or anybody who released some kind of like an unofficial Pokemon Historia book. I'd be just like those emulator websites where I'm getting sued for millions of dollars and Lord knows what else.
Nintendo at the height of its empire was highly litigious. They sued the crap out of people, so let's not return to that.
I understand where they're coming from. It's unfortunate, like there's been some fan games like that AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake, and there's been some other stuff that fan stuff over the years that they shut down. I understand why they did it. It would be nice if they were a little bit more, turn a blind eye to that kind of thing, and some other kind of smaller publishers and developers have been. But I understand where they're coming from. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is.